Denise Coates, the richest woman in the UK and founder of the Bet365 empire, has personally invited Coco Gauff to attend the UK Children's Hope Gala. And while it may look like a simple act of philanthropy, it signals something far bigger unfolding behind the scenes of women's tennis. This isn't a routine sponsorship pitch or a casual charity invite. It's a calculated relationship-building move by a billionaire who understands power, branding, and timing. Coates, who built Bet365 from the ground up into a global gambling giant worth billions, rarely makes personal gestures without strategic intent, and Coco, just 20 years old, a Grand Slam champion, a top 5 player, and one of the most marketable young athletes in the world, represents the perfect bridge to younger audiences, and crucially, the lucrative American market. Charity galas like this are where billionaires soften public perception, network quietly, and plant the seeds for future partnerships, especially in controversial industries like sports betting that rely heavily on image management. For Bet365, aligning with a respected, socially conscious, and globally admired athlete like Coco could legitimize the brand, expand U.S. influence, and signal serious investment in tennis, while for Coco, even attending boosts her international profile and places her in elite business circles. Still, the potential partnership raises real questions about ethics, influence, and the message sent to young fans, especially given tennis's complicated relationship with gambling. Whether or not a deal ever materializes, this invitation is almost certainly the opening move in a long game, one that highlights how modern sponsorships are no longer cold transactions, but carefully engineered relationships that could reshape how power, money, and influence flow through women's tennis. And that's why this moment matters more than it seems. If Coco Gauff ultimately accepts the invitation and later aligns with Bet365, it could mark a turning point in how elite women's tennis players attract and negotiate major sponsorships, especially with industries that bring both massive money and serious controversy. Other players, agents, and brands will be watching closely because a successful partnership here would open the door for more billionaire-led relationship-first deals that bypass traditional sponsorship pipelines. It would also increase pressure on the WTA and its commercial partners to compete with deeper-pocketed sponsors willing to move fast and think globally. At the same time, Coco and her team will have to balance opportunity with responsibility, weighing financial power against personal values and public perception. Whether this ends in a blockbuster endorsement or simply a high-profile appearance, one thing is clear: this invitation isn't just about a charity gala. It's a signal that the biggest money in sports is circling women's tennis, and Coco Gauff is right at the center of it all. And the ripple effects of that reality could stretch far beyond a single athlete or a single event. If Coco Gauff becomes the first major women's tennis star of her generation to be actively courted this directly by a gambling empire, it sets a new precedent for how power brokers approach elite players. Suddenly, sponsorships are no longer just about logos on apparel or commercials during tournaments. They're about access, influence, and long-term alignment with athletes who can shape public opinion and consumer behavior. For the WTA, this kind of attention is both an opportunity and a challenge. An opportunity because it proves that women's tennis still commands the interest of billionaires willing to invest serious capital, and a challenge because it forces the sport to confront uncomfortable questions about who that money comes from and what strings may be attached. From Coco's perspective, every move she makes at this stage of her career carries outsized weight. She isn't just a rising star anymore. She's a symbol of where women's tennis is headed in the post-Serena era. Accepting invitations like this places her in rooms where decisions are made far beyond the baseline, but it also means her choices will be scrutinized by fans, media, and critics who view her as a role model. Aligning, even indirectly, with a gambling brand could complicate the carefully built image she's cultivated around integrity, activism, and responsibility. Yet turning down such overtures could also mean leaving generational wealth and influence on the table. That tension is exactly why this situation is so fascinating. There's also a broader industry shift happening in the background. Traditional sponsors in tennis, luxury watches, cars, fashion houses, are becoming more selective, while gambling companies, flush with cash and eager to normalize their presence in sports, are aggressively seeking credibility through elite athletes. By targeting Coco Gauff, Denise Coates isn't just making a play for one player, she's testing how receptive women's tennis is to deeper, more personal forms of corporate involvement. If this strategy works, it could redefine the sponsorship landscape, pushing more companies to pursue private relationships and exclusive experiences, rather than public negotiations. Ultimately, whether this story ends with a formal partnership or quietly fades after the gala, it already reveals how the game off the court is evolving. Power in modern tennis isn't just held by tournaments and federations, it's increasingly shaped by billionaires who understand branding as well as they understand balance sheets. Coco Gauff standing at the intersection of sport, money, and influence isn't accidental. It's a sign of her stature and the future direction of women's tennis. This isn't just about a single invitation, it's about who gets to shape the next era of the sport and how far they're willing to go. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that this moment reflects a quiet power shift happening across global sports. The traditional hierarchy, where governing bodies, tournaments, and legacy sponsors dictated the flow of money, has been slowly giving way to a more personalized, relationship-driven economy. Billionaires no longer wait for agencies to make introductions. They identify cultural figures early and move directly, building trust and familiarity long before contracts are ever mentioned. Denise Coates inviting Coco Gauff to a charity gala fits perfectly into that model, its influence wrapped in an elegance, ambition disguised as generosity, and long-term strategy hidden behind a single envelope. For women's tennis in particular, this could be a defining crossroads. The sport has never lacked talent, but it has often struggled to convert excellence into sustained mainstream attention. What it needs now isn't just bigger prize money, but consistent narratives, recognizable stars, and investors who believe those stars can carry global brands. Coco represents that possibility better than anyone of her generation. She's young, marketable, articulate, and already proven on the biggest stages, which makes her the ideal face for companies looking to attach themselves to the future rather than the past. When someone like Denise Coates makes a move this deliberate, it signals confidence, not just in Coco as an athlete, but in women's tennis as a long-term commercial asset. At the same time, this situation exposes the moral complexity of modern sponsorships. Gambling companies bring enormous financial firepower, but they also carry reputational risk, especially tied to young, influential athletes. Fans may celebrate the growth of women's tennis while simultaneously questioning the cost of that growth, and Coco's response, whether public or private, will shape how those conversations evolve. If she navigates this carefully, she could redefine what ethical partnerships look like in the sport, setting boundaries while still leveraging her value. If not, she risks becoming a case study in how quickly public perception can shift when business interests collide with personal branding. What makes this story truly compelling, though, is how subtle it all is. There's no press conference, no announced deal, no official partnership, just an invitation, a gala, and a room full of powerful people watching closely. That's often how the biggest changes begin in sports, quietly, politely, and far from the court. By the time the public sees the results, the groundwork has already been laid. Whether this leads to a headline-grabbing endorsement or simply opens doors for future opportunities, one thing is undeniable. Coco Gauff is no longer just being developed by the tennis system, she's being courted by the world's most powerful business players. And once that happens, the sport itself is never quite the same again.